All right. It is good to be with you. It is good to be here at the Council Road Institute. How has it been going? It's been great. I've not been able to be here. We have band practice on Wednesday nights, and so typically if I'm in town and I'm here, that's what I'm doing. But I am so excited about what all of you are doing, the adventure that you're on of going deeper in your understanding and knowledge of God's Word, of theology. As anyone for any length of time knows, we value the Scriptures highly, and we value knowing theology. As a matter of fact, you may or may not know, how many of you know this is not the original Council Road Institute? The original Council Road Institute happened 3 years ago at my house in a small group of like 20 of us. Garrett, you were there, that were reading through different theological books, and we called it the Council Road Institute. And a few years later, now look, all of you, it's become much more popular than a small group of guys at my house. So I'm sure we haven't got credit, so I just want to take credit right now. We called it the Council Road Institute 3 years ago. So we are happy to have the fellowship grow, though. So anyway, but it's really important. It's really important, especially in today's day and age. We no longer live in a country, we no longer live in a society where it's enough to say that you are a Christian. Being able to explain what you believe and to defend your faith is critical. And so what you do here week after week, not only in coming to these discussions and hearing these talks and things like that, but in your own preparation, in your own reading and study throughout the week of the course material that you have, it's really important. And it is setting you up not just to be someone that has learned something, but to be someone that can actually replicate what they have learned. We'll learn a little bit more about that later on today. Before we do, I want to give a kind of opening question to discuss around the table, and then we'll talk about it together publicly, or maybe we'll hear a few fun stories. The kind of icebreaker question is, share about a time, if you can think of one, when you felt the Lord, the Spirit, prompt you to do something that was a bit unusual, a bit out of the ordinary. It could be something small, it could be a big step of faith. Go ahead and just, a few of you around your table, share about a time when you felt the Holy Spirit leading you to do something that seemed like it was a bit unusual. And then we'll bring it back together. Outstanding. All right. Well, hopefully you guys had some good time at your tables to discuss a time when God asked you to do something unusual. I wonder if there are maybe a few of you that would like to share either your own story or someone at your tables that you want to throw under the bus of what is a way that God has led you to do things that seemed unusual or seemed unexpected. That might have been her pickup line. She may have been fishing for a date right there. I thought you were going to go up to her and say, like the way that you entered that conversation was, God gave me a vision that you would be sitting here, and then try and like work backwards from that. So that's what I was hoping. I hope the story would end. So speaking of, I'm not going to call on you. How many? These are great stories of like, man, the Lord like was clearly moving in an unexpected way. How many of you have had times where you thought God was calling you to do something, and then you did it, and you were like, that didn't seem like it was Him. That was probably just pizza the night before or something. Okay, not just me. Well, that's my story. So I had a couple years away from council when I was hoping and waiting that Rick might let me come back and work here at a place called Purcell, Oklahoma, which I affectionately call First Baptist Church Purgatory, Oklahoma. It was a challenging church. It was a rough church, but there was a time whenever Brian Banks and Rick were hosting a guy. Some of you may remember this guy, Sundar Singh Moses. Am I getting that name right? And so Sundar was a pastor from India, and there was a group that was going to be having like lunch with him or something, and he had one incredible story after another of like the Lord leading him to do things that just did not make sense. Like he told the story about how he was driving and he felt like the Lord told him to turn, and so he turned and took another turn and then ended up at this door that he's never been in front of, and so the Lord said to knock, and he knocked, and then nothing happened, and waited 15 minutes, which I don't know why you stand there 15 minutes, and knocked again. And anyway, later found out the guy at that door was someone that was about to commit suicide, and right then was when he knocked. I mean, things like that, right? That you're just like, how is that, how do I get some of that, right? Like, how can I be sort of on mission with the Lord that way? And so I'm leaving council. I'm driving back to First Baptist Purgatory, and it's about an hour south of from where we are, Purcell is. And as I'm driving, I'm like, okay, Lord, like, here I am, send me, right? Like, where would you have me go? And I see a guy standing on a street corner who looks like he needs a ride, and I don't advise this, I don't typically do this, but I was like, that's it. That's what I'm supposed to do, is give this guy a ride. And so we're down here on Council and I-40. I pick him up, and I ask him, like, hey, where are you trying to get to? Where can I help you? And he said, I'm trying to get to OSU. And I was like, oh, yeah, OSU, okay, so I know exactly where that is. It's not far. He's like, no, I'm trying to get to Stillwater. And I was like, all right, let's go. And so we drove to Stillwater. The whole time I'm like begging him, basically, like, this guy's got to make a decision for Christ. Why else would he be in my vehicle an hour out of the way and then 2 hours back down? Anyway, he did not come to faith that day. Hopefully, the Lord, if he was leading me, I at least helped get someone from point A to point B. But it was an unexpected call. And what we see as we've studied this week, as you've been doing your reading and homework, was that Jesus was called to do things. He was led by the Spirit often in this way, and that in general, Jesus was not who people expected Jesus to be. So you notice as you're studying, it's the religious leaders who would say that they're expecting Jesus, and yet again and again, Jesus proves himself to be unexpected from the religious leaders that would have claimed that they were waiting for the Messiah. Does this make sense? You remember this from your reading. And so we're looking at the Galilean ministry of Jesus throughout Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. First passage we'll look at is in Luke chapter 4. So get your Bibles out, turn to that passage. In Luke chapter 4, not if, but when you have a chance to come with me to Museum of the Bible on a trip, one of my favorite stops that we make at Museum of the Bible is there is an entire floor dedicated to the story, the narrative of Scripture unfolding. And on that floor, there is a recreation of Nazareth, like of a first century Nazareth, including a synagogue. And a synagogue that would have kind of looked and felt what a Jewish synagogue would have looked and felt like back in the day. And so it's an incredible place. And this passage is one I always read when we go there, because this passage is Jesus when he himself is teaching in the synagogue there in Nazareth. And so it says this, and I'll begin in verse 16. He came to Nazareth where he had been brought up, and as was his custom, he went to the synagogue on the Sabbath day, and he stood up to read, and the scroll of the prophet Isaiah was given to him. And he unrolled the scroll and found the place where it was written. So, by the way, just enter with me. You can close your eyes if you want. Pretend you're in this recreated first century synagogue. One of the things that's often different that we have to keep in mind is when Jesus went to teach the Bible, he had a scroll that he unrolled. And he had the scroll of Isaiah. He didn't have a scroll for the entire Hebrew Bible, right? The entire Old Testament. He had a scroll of Isaiah. He goes through and picks up in our chapter 60 in Isaiah. It says, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim liberty to the captives and recovering of sight to the blind, to set at liberty those who are oppressed, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." And he rolled up the scroll and gave it back to the attendant and sat down. And the eyes of all in the synagogue were fixed on him, and he began to say to them, "Today this scripture has been fulfilled in your hearing." And this was outrageous, right? Because Jesus is essentially saying that this passage in the Old Testament is pointing to him. And it's important to note this because we often talk about how Jesus, the whole Bible is about Jesus, and Jesus teaches us to read that Bible. The passage we often go to is Luke chapter 24, on the road to Emmaus, when he appears post-resurrection to a couple of disciples, and it has this incredible line where he says, beginning with the law, He showed them all the things of the Old Testament, how they were fulfilled in himself, right? It was like a Bible study where he's showing how all Old Testament is fulfilled in him. But it's not just in the Old Testament that we see in the Gospel of John, where he says to the Pharisees, you search the Scriptures because you think in them you have eternal life, but it is the Scriptures that testify about me. Right here, when he's in Nazareth, he unrolls the scroll of Isaiah, and he says, clear as day, this passage you've been reading in Isaiah, it speaks about me. And so, in other words, reading the Bible in a way that is Christ-centered is not just kind of a tactic or not something that we get from the apostles or things like that, which would be enough if it was. But the reason the apostles taught that was because Jesus himself claimed that over and over and over again. And so that's important to know, and it's important to remember, to hold in your mind the fact that Jesus was rejected by religious leaders, that he wasn't hailed as the promised coming Messiah, and that was in no small part because they didn't know what they were looking for. And so for us, again, it just re-emphasizes. I wanted to start with this because it just lays the foundation for how important not just tonight is, but in general, this path that you're on of learning the Scriptures. Jesus, from the very beginning of his ministry, told everyone that the Scriptures were about himself. Jesus himself taught us to expect the unexpected with him. So let's do this. We are going to do something that I realized about 10 minutes ago. I'm dipping into whoever's next week, potentially, but I think I'm going to actually offer some things that are different. So as an example, to kind of set up some of what I want to do later, I want you to read 4 passages of Scripture, and I say read, skim, just look for clues. It's going to take you a while to read all of these, but there is one account of Jesus' ministry while he was in Galilee or any region where he was, that are recorded in all 4 gospel accounts. And that is the feeding of the 5,000. And so what I'd like to do is I'm going to give you 4 passages of your table. So be looking at your table because someone's going to take kind of each of these and you can work through these. So first is Matthew 14, 13 to 21. So someone at the table say, I'll take Matthew 14. All right, next is Mark 6, 30 through 44. Someone have that? All right, I'm going to trust, hopefully they do. Luke 9, 10 through 17. Someone else at the table. And then finally, John chapter 6, verses 1 through 15. So one more time, Matthew 14, 13 to 21. Mark, Oh, I'm not going to be good at this. I'll try. Matthew 14, 13 through 21. Can you see that? Am I wasting everyone's time? Okay. Mark 6, 30 through 44. Luke 9, 10 through 17. And John 6, 1 through 15. Matthew 14, 13 to 21, Mark 6, 30 to 44, Luke 9, 10 through 17, John 6, verses 1 through 15. Here's the purpose of this exercise. Here's what I want you to do. I want to talk a little bit tonight as we look at the accounts of Jesus' life in Galilee. Hopefully, this will be a little bit different content that you read. Hopefully, it's a nice pairing to what you've read. I want you to look and see how each gospel writer speaks a little bit differently. What words are consistent? What words are new or fresh? Are there details that are in one, not the other? Again, you're not going to have time to do all of this in depth. We don't need you to. But just to get a general sense, skim that passage and then begin to discuss what you notice. And we'll bring it back in about 5 to 10 minutes. All right? Go to your groups. All right, let's come back together. For time's sake, we won't take time to hear from each table different things you saw that were similarities and differences, but can we all say that there are similarities and there's differences in terms of different emphasis throughout these different gospel accounts? Yeah, there is. There is. And so one of the things that I want to address to you, because I think it's important, is that as you are studying the Bible, I want you to have confidence that the words that you are studying are reliable, that they are trustworthy, that the accounts that we have, what we base our faith on is the account of Jesus' life, death, and resurrection, which is found entirely in the Scriptures, right? And this is not one book. It is a collection of 66 books by 40 authors over a span of over 1,500 years across 3 continents, priests and prophets and kings and fishermen, all different types of people from all different walks of life write this story, and it tells one unified story, but that is often attacked. It's often in question by people who want to say several different things. One of the attacks they make is that the Bible is inconsistent in the 4 gospel accounts. So no doubt by now you've been told these 4 gospel accounts, these are the 4 writers of the gospel. Mark, by the way, probably the first one, and then Matthew and Luke use some of Mark, and then John is quite different in terms of as you're reading through. Each of these provide a different kind of portrait of who Jesus is. And what people often want to do is to look at it through the lens of them telling the same story and kind of almost like comparing eyewitnesses to see if their testimonies line up. But the problem is they don't do it in such a way that is helpful if you're actually interviewing eyewitnesses. What I mean is that you would expect for people to remember different things about an event happening. So if there was a robbery that they witnessed or a car crash or something, you would expect different witnesses to have different memories of the same event that often then when you bring them together have sort of these undesigned coincidences that prove in many ways, that give evidence to the possibility or the probability of that event. So to give like a flesh and bones example, like pretend for a minute that I am telling you a story about a time that Landry and I hang out. We go to lunch. And what I mentioned to you is that I remember that Landry spilt his drink all over me. And that, I was just like wet from my pants down because he spilt his drink. And Landry, when he's telling this story, talks about how crowded the restaurant was and how we couldn't find a table and everyone was kind of elbow to elbow. Well, those 2 facts are not, we're not making the same statement or the same claim, but you can see where it begins to color a picture of what happened. Okay, well, both of those things could be true. They're both saying different things, but those sort of undesigned coincidences help make light of one another. This is what is happening over and over and over again in the gospel accounts. So as you study these chapters, or as you have studied, you may have noticed different points where they have different points of emphasis. This doesn't undermine the reliability of Scripture. I want to contend it actually enforces it. So there's a few examples. For time's sake, I can't go into all of them. One that I think is really interesting, or really is if you look in Mark chapter 6, it says, the apostles returned to Jesus and told him what they had done and taught. Come by your way, for many were coming and going, and no had leisure even to eat them. So this is an account earlier where Jesus is being told that they know that there were many coming and going. And then in John 6, it says the Passover of the same situation, says the Passover of Jews was at hand. So this is an example of they are giving different perspectives. One writer says many were coming and going. The other said it's the Passover. What do we know about Passover? Tons of people. Josephus would record, if a first century Jewish historian, of the droves of people that would come to Jerusalem for Passover. So as it relates to this story, in Mark, he says something about the account of the feeding of the 5,000 that helps us to see an example of this. In Mark chapter 6, 39, it says he commanded them to sit in groups. Who has Mark 6? Read verse 39, actually. I want you to know I'm not making this up. Mark 6:39, loud and proud. Someone read that out.
He commanded them to make all sit down by companies
Upon the green grass. If you notice, that was a detail that Mark thought important that other writers didn't. That's not a big deal. Green grass, brown grass, who cares? What's the big deal? Well, the big deal is this: in Israel, there's only one time of year that you have green grass. The way that in a setting like this that you would have a group together, it would be springtime. It would be the exact time the other writers testify that it happened. And so again, you have this kind of, if we would, for our equivalent, it'd be something like about how the leaves were changing, and someone else say something about how it was college football season. Praise the Lord, right? Like you kind of know, you're like, okay, yeah, I see those two times are the same, but we know that of our kind of area and rhythms, but we don't know that about them. So anyway, this is just one example of several that we don't have time to fully unpack. So first off, I hope that can give us some confidence that the testimonies of the four Gospels were by people that were truly eyewitness accounts. Secondly, that I'll try and prove this, let's look at Matthew chapter 10, verses 2 through 4. You've studied this week the calling of the 12 disciples, how Jesus called the 12 men. Jesus, another way that he is unexpected throughout his ministry is he is not bringing along the people that one would expect, right? That he is constantly bringing people into his circle that were not the religious elites of the day, but that were either common kind of church people, common Jews of their day, not the elites, and Gentiles, which we'll finish with, scandalous. In Matthew chapter 10, let me turn to it, sorry about that. Matthew chapter 10, he gives us the list of his disciples' names, and let's see what he says. He says, the names of the 12 apostles are these. First, Simon, who's called Peter, and Andrew, his brother, James, the son of Zebedee, and John, his brother, Philip and Bartholomew, Thomas and Matthew, the tax collector, James, the son of Alphaeus, and Thaddeus, Simon the zealot, and Judas Iscariot, who betrayed him. What's remarkable about this? Like nothing, right? Like it's just a list of names. Like let's open up a phone book. What's remarkable about it? It's just names. Who cares? Well, I'll tell you, the names are funny because names kind of ebb and flow. So how many people in this room other than me are named Michael? Any other Michaels? I'm the only one. This is like the first time that has ever happened, which actually hurts my point. But the point is, think about how many people that you know that share my name. Think about how many people you know that are named Michael, right? And not just people that you know, but famous people you can think of whose names are Michael. There was a span of 100 years, a span of 50 years that Michael was the number one name 25 years. The other 25 years, Michael was the second most popular name. So that in the 70s, 80s, 90s, it was 1 out of every 30 boys was born in the United States was named Michael. So there's a lot of Michaels. There's a lot of us running around out there, which is why you know so many Michaels. On the flip side, some of you have very unique names. So my wife's name is Lauren. It's also very common. So we named our kids names that we thought were a little bit more different. And so my daughter, Zion, is one, and my son, Ezra. Ezra, right after we chose his name, we felt like we found out about a ton of Ezras. We felt like we only knew a few. How many of you had this experience? You name your kid something you think it's really unique, and then you're like, how are there so many children with this name? So that was our case with Ezra. Zion, not so much. Zion, when she goes into a class, she's the only Zion. And so in other words, if you were talking to someone about kids in the children's ministry, and you mention Zion, the children's ministry workers know who you're talking about. You don't have to qualify it. If you went into my connection group and said, like 30 of us, and said something about Michael, they would say, Michael who? Like, which Michael are you referring to? Because there's 6 of them in our class, right? Like, it's a very common name. So here's why that's significant for this list. What we see throughout the New Testament when it gives a list of people's names is the people who need qualifiers have them, and the people that have a more obscure name do not. And so this is pretty new research. Like 2003, research was conducted asking what are the most common Jewish names among Palestinian Jews from 330 BC to 200 AD. Number 1, most common name, Simon. Simon. Number 2, Joseph. 3, Lazarus. 4, Judas. 5, John. 6, Jesus. And it goes on. Number 9, Matthew. Number 11, James or Jacob. Number 39, Thaddeus. 50, Bartholomew. 61, Philip. So going back to this list, look back at the list at verse 2. First, Simon. Simon, first most popular name. Tons of Simons. Simon is the Michael of first century Palestine, right? Like, there are a ton of Simons. So they have to qualify who it is. Simon, who is called Peter. Add a name to help make sure that you understand this is the Simon that we're talking about. And Andrew, his brother, by the way, Andrew's not high on that list, so doesn't need more of us. James, the son of Zebedee. James, 11th on this list, and so wants to make sure you know. And John, his brother. John, 5th most common name in this time. And now we have a couple of names that aren't that common. Philip, 61st common, and Bartholomew, 50th common name. No qualifiers, because they're not a top 10 common name. You see, so we can go through the rest of it. You understand the point, right? So why do I bring that up? Well, one of the attacks that people make against the account of the gospel writers is that the gospels were written hundreds of years after Christ and probably written in Rome or something like that, or highly edited in Rome, in a distant land. And so to put yourself in this thought experiment, pretend that you, without the help of the internet, are going to, or libraries, are going to write a novel based on the French Revolution in the 18th century. And you are going to try to use fake names to create an account of something that happened during the French Revolution in the 18th century. And you are going to use these names and try to guess which names you need to add qualifiers to, and try and guess which names are going to be so obscure that they don't need those qualifiers. No, none of us could do that, right? Like, we may be able to guess a couple, Jacques, or like Juliette. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't know French names, but you could probably guess a couple, but there's no way you'd know the frequency. Well, we see that not only here, we see this throughout the New Testament. An example, most common female name in this day, far and away, for the women is Mary. And so all the time you have Mary, the mother of Jesus. You have Mary of Magdala, Mary Magdalene, et cetera, et cetera. And so, again, I say that because how did they know they needed these qualifiers? Is because they knew they were writing about people that they knew. And here's the thing. Here's the funny thing about names. Have you had the experience where you're talking to someone that or talking to someone about someone that you have known a long time? Probably maybe not one of your very best friends, but you have been like around them a lot, like so much that it's weird if you ask them what their name is, right? Like you have seen them so much, you run in the same circles, and so then you're like, oh man, like, it's the guy, and he did this, and whatever, however you try and explain it. When you are doing that, you are not remembering a person's name. Do you know why? It's because there's typically no logical connection between the name and the person, right? Like, my name is Michael because my parents chose that. I didn't choose that for myself. They didn't name me Michael, because it means like bald-headed, and they knew I'd be bald-headed or something like that. Like, there's no reason my name should be Michael other than that's what my name is. And so oftentimes you can probably think of times where you can tell a story about something that happened to you in high school, and you can tell a story about someone in great detail, but their name escapes you. You know this feeling? Shake your heads yes if you do. So I say all this because if the gospel writers can get the names right, the hardest thing to remember, the hardest thing to recall, then we have all the more reason to believe that they can get all of these other details right as well. And so not just from the undesigned coincidences, but also through this. So Jesus himself, another reason that we can have confidence is because Jesus was a genius teacher. The teachings of Jesus are absolutely remarkable. And so he is constantly using different tricks to help disciples remember the things. So as you're reading, as you're studying those passages, and you notice that they are with great memory, like writing the Sermon on the Mount, you're going, how in the world could they remember the Sermon on the Mount? Well, the answer is that Jesus did a few things that are nice tricks. One, he would often lean on the Old Testament or repetition. And so, for instance, you'll talk about this in a week or so. couple weeks. In Luke 15, you have the three parables of lostness. So you have the lost sheep, the lost coin, and the parable of the prodigal son, right? Those three stories are told back to back to back. In the first, the lost sheep, it's a sheep that goes away from the flock, right? In the second story, it's the story of the lost coin. It's something in the house that is missing or is the problem. And then in the story of the prodigal son, you have the son that goes away and the son that's at home, right? So he's using kind of repetition and ebbs and flows. There's a whole lot of connections to some of Genesis that we can't get into. But I say this because this is something that good teachers do. Another thing that good teachers do is they will repeat themselves. Another thing that good teachers will do is they will repeat themselves. And so, for instance, see if anyone can finish these Rick-isms. My sin was so bad that God had to die. You need to say more. See? God's love for, I heard, some of you are like embarrassed. Like, it's just saying, he's right over there. Yeah, God's love is so great for us, he was willing to die. What about this one? Is the fish more free if it jumps out of the fishbowl and onto the couch, right? Yeah. Or, another just good one. I meant to end with that one. The ground is level where? At the foot of the cross, right. So, like Rick, Jesus is also smart. Jesus repeats himself. Matthew's gospel is an example. So in Matthew's gospel, we don't have time. Chapter 7, verse 15 and 20, he talks about good fruit and bad fruit. Does the same thing again in Matthew 12, 33 through 35. In Matthew's gospel, sign of Jonah, he talks about in 12, 38 through 39. Does the same thing, chapter 16, verses 1 through 4. I could give you 8 more examples in Matthew, 5 more in Mark, 8 in Luke, and 5 in John, where in the same gospel, they are repeating themselves. I say this because one of the common criticisms of the Gospels, of the historical reliability of the eyewitness account of the Gospels, is that you have conflicting evidence of when different things were told. So as an example, on the Sermon on the Mount, let's get there because I'm behind schedule already. The Sermon on the Mount, in the very center of the Sermon on the Mount is the Lord's Prayer in Matthew chapter 6. Go ahead and turn to Matthew chapter 6 right now because we will end there. In Matthew chapter 6, in the center, Jesus gives the Lord's Prayer. But, if you can look at this later, in Luke chapter 11, verses 1 through 14, his disciples come to him after he's been praying in private, and that's when he teaches the Lord's Prayer. So they say, well, look, they can't even get the story straight of when did Jesus teach the Lord's Prayer. Was it at the Sermon on the Mount with a bunch of people listening in, or was it in private in a prayer time when his disciples came to him? Well, if within each gospel, all 4 have examples, multiple examples, between 5 and 10, of different times where Jesus said one thing in one chapter and repeats the exact same thing word for word later in that same gospel account, then wouldn't it make sense that Jesus teaches the same things over and over again so that they will remember, and so they are recounting it at different times? This makes sense? So again, the evidence for the reliability of the Gospels is overwhelming. So, Sermon on the Mount. Let's land the plane here a little bit. It begins with the familiar word, blessed. Why would this word blessed be familiar to first century Jews? Let me ask you like this. What passage in the Old Testament would this echo for them? Deuteronomy, Exodus? Good questions. Blessed means, anyone know what it means? Happy. Happy. It's the good life, to be blessed or blessed. And so Jesus, in beginning his greatest sermon that Matthew records, opened his mouth and taught them, saying, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth, etc. The Psalter, the book of Psalms, begins in chapter 1. Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the wicked, nor stands in the way of sinners, nor sits in the seat of scoffers, but his delight is in the law of the Lord, and on his law he meditates day and night. So as they're sitting there, Jesus is already teaching in such a way that he's orienting to something that they would be familiar with in that kind of pinnacle psalm. And then he kind of begins into this sermon. Throughout the sermon, if you did the reading, I believe this was in the book, it kind of divides it out into different sections. But essentially, it kind of shows that Jesus is coming to fulfill the law in the section 17 through 20, saying, "For I tell you, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven." Following this, he begins to show for those that would be sort of sinners and tax collectors different ways that maybe people who feel like they're far from God fail God, and continuing to raise the standard, and also turns it on religious people and talks about giving and the right way to give, praying, which is when he teaches the Lord's Prayer, etc. And then wraps up the Sermon on the Mount with some of these other passages that are foundational of building your house on a good foundation. We don't have time for Parable of the Sower, which is really disappointing because that's my favorite one. Let's go to John 4. In John 4, verse 7 through 26, he has this encounter with the woman at the well. And the woman at the well, if we had time to talk deeper about it, Jesus goes to her, a woman of Samaria, as him, a Jew that was a rabbi, speaking to her, and in a way that completely shocks and even in some ways upsets our modern ideas of how we should relate to one another across gender in conservative circles like we do. He goes to her, he sits with her, he actually asks her for a drink, even though she, by their standards, would be considered unclean. And she begins to try and turn, she becomes uncomfortable when he begins asking her questions and tries to turn the conversation about worship. Jews say we should worship on this mountain, we say this mountain. Jesus, seeing her heart, quickly gets to what she's really after, which is the fact that she knows she's not worthy to worship at either mountain. And so Jesus ultimately gives to her a revelation that blows me away. The woman, verse 25, said to him, "I know that the Messiah is coming, he who is called Christ, and when he comes, he will tell us all things." And Jesus said to her, "I who speaks to you am he." So while Jesus was unexpected for the religious leaders that didn't see him coming, he chose to reveal himself to a woman who was rejected by these religious leaders. He chose to reveal his true identity to this woman and to many others who would not be those that were expected to hear who Jesus was claiming to be, what he was claiming to do. But in the same way, Jesus himself would be rejected. Jesus himself would be rejected ultimately by going to the cross, dying in our place for our sin. And what we now have is an account of his life where all of it points to Jesus, and it's historically reliable, where there's overwhelming evidence that we can trust all four gospel accounts. And when we take them, we shouldn't take sort of one eyewitness testimony, but we should read all four to be able to harmonize what actually it was that happened. And the hope that I have is that we would, Jesus, when he was talking in Mark about his experience with at his hometown, said on the Sabbath day when he was teaching in the synagogue, many who heard him were astonished, saying, "Where did this man get these things? What is this wisdom given to him? And how are such mighty works done by his hands? Is it not the carpenter, the son of Mary, and brother of James?" And, well, I want to point out something else. "And they took offense at him. And Jesus said to him, 'A prophet is not without honor except in his hometown and among relatives in his home household.' And he could do no mighty work there except that he laid his hands on a few sick people and healed them. And he marveled because of their unbelief, and he went about among the villages teaching." May we not reject Jesus. May we not neglect Jesus because Jesus is unexpected. And so may we see Jesus for who he is, and may we see other people for who they are, and see other people the way that Jesus sees them. There's a temptation for all of this study, all of this learning to be something that goes into your head and puffs us up with knowledge. But as the Apostle Paul would say, my prayer for you is that knowledge puffs up, but love builds up, that it would go from your head to your heart, change the way that you love Jesus, change the way that you love others, and share him with people that are unexpected. Let me pray for you. Father, thank you for our time. Thank you for this church. Thank you for the ways that you lead us. God, I pray that your Spirit would lead us. I pray that we would have weird, unusual encounters with the Holy Spirit this week, that you would call us to weird things, that you would make us obedient to step out in faith, whether it be going on a date with someone, whether it be our giving, whether it be just spending time sharing the gospel with someone that seems uncomfortable. I pray you would embolden us with your Spirit. Thank you for the chance that we have to be together, and pray that next week that you would bring us back. We love you, Jesus, and pray this in Christ's name. Amen. Dismissed. You're dismissed.